Hi, I'm Judy Rinkin, and we've lived here in the Valley for a number of years. Our son went through middle school and graduated from high school here in the Valley.
And my name is Mike Rinkin, and the son that Judy's talking about is Eric. And Eric is 44 years old, or 41 years old. And then we have an older son, 44. He's our natural child, and Eric we adopted at 16 months.
I'm David Foster.
And I'm Brandy Foster.
And we've been married a little over 10 years. And our daughter is Alexa. We adopted her in 2004. And she is 8 now.
I'm Pam McAllister, and I'm the grandmother of 2 teenagers that live with me, young adults. And I've lost my mom and my dad and my husband and my daughter. And that's how the twins came to live with me. And they're both 19 years old now and with developmental disabilities.
Well, his name is Daniel, and he's 4.5 years old. He has been diagnosed, well, it's been an interesting process. He has an educational diagnosis of autism, and he also has a medical diagnosis of autism. We've also tried to go through the CDRC, which is the Child Development and Rehabilitation Center up at Dornbecker. We've gone through an evaluation there. It was like a 4-hour evaluation, and in 4 hours, my son performed the best he has ever performed before that or after that. And so they went, oh, no, he's not on the autism spectrum. I'm like, well, yes, he is. But so that was part of the whole process.
So, like Mike said, Eric's first diagnosis was bipolar, but we knew that there was something else missing. And we looked back on his early life, and we could see lots of different things that just didn't quite add up. He was very bright. He could do a lot of things, but he really had very lagging social skills. And she suggested that we go to Oregon Health Science University. And he then received a diagnosis of Asperger's. And the doctor there, who's now retired, Dr. Gene Stubbs, said, I don't know where everybody's been, but this is. And Eric was 25. So we had a lot of years wondering, we just kept saying, the pieces don't all fit.
We knew when we adopted her that because of situations during the pregnancy, that it was a possibility. So her pediatricians were told to watch for it, and we had her evaluated at 7 months by the early intervention services in Eugene, where we lived, and they said, oh, well, she's behind, but let's wait just a few more months and make sure that it's just a result of, that it's not just a result of the rough beginning that she had from, being adopted. And so we waited and checked again, and she was still had developmental delays. We didn't aggressively pursue a diagnosis until she was 5.5 or 6, when they started refusing to accept developmental delay as a diagnosis. And so we went to Dornbecker to a clinic where they evaluated her in many areas, physical, daily living skills, and gave her lots of tests. And then they gave us a diagnosis of something called Worcester-Drought syndrome, which is a kind of cerebral palsy. And they said that she seemed to have a mild to moderate intellectual disability, although they used the R word, which was still okay then.
Well, that was the official word. The medical word was mental retardation. So then that's changed. So
He started out right about 3 years old. He started kind of regressing in terms of his ability to communicate. And he also, his behavior became a whole lot worse than than I would ever even expect a 2-year-old to behave. He'd been beautiful through 2 years old. The terrible twos just really didn't ever happen for him. And then I figured, at 3 years old, he was just kind of coming into the terrible twos, and so okay, we'll deal with this. But it just got progressively worse. He didn't deal with it; he just got worse. And so I started searching for things that must be what's going on, and I looked at autism as one of those things that it could be. But I went, because he's not, not rocking in a corner, and he's not, he's verbal, and there's so many things that were pointing to other away from autism. Then I went, and I don't really want him to be autistic. It's kind of a typical parent thing. I don't want to believe it, kind of thing. But I truly thought that was not really the case. There must have been something else that was going on. And we went straight to the occupational therapist, and basically within 2 weeks of him going to the occupational therapist, he started saying sentences again. He started progressing in communication, and which was really amazing because they weren't doing any speech therapy. It was just physically. It was just all the movement and all of that that she did with him. And the occupational therapy made a world of difference in how he behaved too. Not right away, but it took a while longer for that stuff to show up. But again, within 2 weeks, he was actually starting to progress with his speech and his other communication styles. And so I thought that was really amazing. And I thought, oh, gee, we're on the right track here, and no big deal. And then in 1 month, the daycare that he'd been at decided get out in one day because he'd done some pretty totally unacceptable things at that daycare. And so when they kicked him out, I had to scramble to find another daycare because I had to work. And we found a daycare that could deal with kids that had some special needs. I realized later that they weren't quite as prepared as I thought they were. But I took him there, and they started working with him on his behavior and being, in better control of himself and things like that. So he started to get a little bit better there. And the owner kept saying, well, I really think, he behaves a lot like my son did, and her son had Asperger's. And so I was like, I'm still not wanting to really think about it. And then about a couple of months later, I realized, I probably should have this checked out, and I should really look at this. I read up on autism and went, I'm still kind of like, and then I went on YouTube, and there was this video where somebody who, I'm not sure if I can mention him by name, but there's a grandparent support group for autism, and there was a man named Dr. Monkarsh. I don't know what his first name is, but I went through all of the videos that pertain to me, and a couple of them were about how to translate the DSM-4 criteria. And it went through each piece of it and described, this is what you're looking for when you're looking at this criteria here. These kinds of behaviors fit into that. And as he went through, I was like, that's my son. He's doing these things. He meets these criteria. I took notes, and then I also went to Temple Grandin's website, and I did I looked at some of the videos that she did, and just snippets of them because they're really long videos. And I realized, he definitely. And I took notes, and then the next time I went to his pediatrician, I brought the notes with me. She spent 2 hours with us. She stayed an hour past her quitting time to go over all of this information. And not only did she, she got all the information she wanted to write down, that's his diagnosis, without any further question, but also she got to see one of his meltdowns.
For me, it wasn't it wasn't a shock. Clearly, we had sort of known this all along. And I don't think I had built up in my mind lots of expectations as to what my child would be like. So I don't think I went through the same type of mourning period that is often described for parents of those with disabilities. I have a disability of my own, and I've grown up with that, and there are things that are heartbreaking about it sometimes. Certain things, not being able to participate with your peers, and I still experience that with Alexa sometimes. Sometimes it's just gut-wrenching when she's not able to when she doesn't want to maybe play the same things that her age group peers are playing. But at other times, when she successfully does something that she's been working on for months or years with just this great quality of determination that she has, then I have, just a euphoria that my child has done something so amazing. And to another parent, that would just be like, oh yeah, she did an arabesque. They taught her that in dance class, but my daughter has spent hours practicing that. And so the first time that she did it last week, I was like, wow. I was just, it's just wonderful. So I don't know that it's different for other parents or not, but I'm sure that parents of neurotypical children also experience highs and lows, but I don't think that it's a tragedy. I don't feel
No.
that we've lost something huge. So
I've heard from a lot of parents that it's completely devastating to get that diagnosis, but for me it actually wasn't. The reason for that is that I was struggling just to figure out what on earth is going on with my son, and how do I get it better. I wanted it to get better, and with the diagnosis, it wasn't about putting him in a hole. This is his he's a peg, and this is the hole I'm going to drill him into. It wasn't about trying to put a label on him or anything like that. It was about getting him the services he needed to get our lives back on track. To get him so he could perform appropriately in life circumstances, and for me to be able to go back to work or whatever. So for me, it was actually a big relief to go, aha, I finally have something that I can, it's not a great way to put it, but it's something I can hang on him so people will actually pay attention and do what needs to be done to get him the services he needed. So so the diagnosis was actually a relief for me, although in a way, learning that it's something that's not going to go away. It's not something that's going to necessarily get completely cured or anything. That's a little disappointing, because I know that, his life is always going to be a bit of a struggle because his brain works differently from other people's. So that connection is always going to be something he's going to have to work really hard on. But the diagnosis and the services have shown me that that he can get a whole lot better. Because he has, over the last 9 months, he's gone from being the child that nobody really wanted to deal with at all to somebody that the bus drivers fight over. They want him on their bus. So, not fight really, but they actually will fight to get him on their bus because they really like him. People really like my son, even though he's intense, but he's not anywhere near as intense as he was. So the services that came out of that diagnosis were well worth, any pain the thought might have brought up.
Well, when we adopted Eric, Mike was in seminary at the time, studying to be a pastor, and Mother and Daddy said they were concerned that we were adopting a child with some potential problems, and how were we going to be able to take care of him, what we were going to do. And so they were not super anxious for us to adopt. However, I have to say that both of our families, accepted Eric as our son, so.
Well, my parents actually, and David's stepmother, they were fine with it. They were pretty accepting. I think that they were a little slow to believe that it was, a for sure thing. I think that they were still sort of in the mindset that this was a developmental delay and that she would just one day, start to catch up. So sometimes I think they still think that, but as I said, my family has experienced disability, and part of David's family also has experienced, mental illness and disability. So it's just a part of life. It's just another part of who we are. It's not a huge disappointment or anything like that. It was just, okay, what are you going to do next?
Yeah, I agree. The similar. I have similar memories of other people thinking it was temporary and or being slow to come to acceptance that it was something more permanent. But other than that, I mean, they did. So it didn't take them that. I mean, they did pretty well, I think. So.
At the beginning, mostly what I was told, I didn't believe it. And I felt that my grandchildren were typical grandchildren. And so when they would come to stay with me, which was almost every weekend, they would either spend a Saturday with me or the entire weekend. And my husband, he was alive at the time. And so I was used to having them do that, but they were good at my house. They now I know they walked on eggshells, but you didn't see that happening. But they were very careful to not upset me. So they had that logic. And they got in trouble, but they knew Grandma had rules, and if I would say enough's enough, they would listen to me. And so I think that was the benefit of being a grandma, was that I got to see the better side of them, and they were on their best behavior. And then they came through just like typical kids, that they would get in trouble. They were not angels, and we just dealt with it in the best way. And I think probably that was the hardest thing, is to have my daughter tell me that they were having difficulties, and it was the borderline of autism from my granddaughter. And she would do some things I didn't understand, but I could talk to her and she would relate. And so I had the visual of what I've seen on TV of how a person acts, and she was nothing like that. She was a hugger. She was a stay close to you person. She wanted to talk to you all the time. So I wasn't seeing any of the signs. And now I learn there's a lot more signs than just that the adjusting to change is very traumatic, and to the point of having temper tantrums that are way out of line. And but that didn't occur at my house. It was like my house was a safe place, and they just behaved. I mean, and that isn't the right word, but I don't know what else you call it. It just was protecting Grandma, I'm sure. And they have told me since that their mom would always say, now be good at Grandma's house and don't make her feel bad. So they have come back and told me things like that. And it's too bad, because if I'd known it sooner, I would have been in group right along with her.
Well, family's sort of a hot topic because as a parent of a child who has special needs, any kind of special needs really, there's always that, oh, you're just kind of blowing that out of proportion. Oh, they're totally normal. This is totally normal for a child like this, a child who's a boy, or a child who's a girl, or a child who's 4, or whatever. To some degree, that might be true. But we parents of children who have special needs, we face a lot of people who have no idea what we're going through, no idea whatsoever, and they're not with us all the time, so they don't see everything that falls under that category of special needs or whatever. So a lot of times we get, oh, poo-poo, it's not that big a deal. Or we get people who look at us with the, well, your child is just spoiled. You really need to treat them, more rigidly, or you need to do this, or you need to do that, and just don't understand it doesn't work for our children. And the same thing goes, you would think that family would be more receptive, or more supportive, or more understanding, or whatever. But I've actually heard from a lot of other parents that it's just like with my family, they don't get it. And it's much harder for them to see what's going on because they're too close. And so they question whether the diagnosis is right. They question whether I'm doing the right things for my children. So family can be the most supportive they can be, but a lot of times they can be the most disappointing, because they're too close to really understand what it means, really.
We thought it was just another thing,
diagnosis.
another bunny trail that we were going down. And over time, it has been, Brad has understood better about Eric. He still gets really kind of frustrated because he forgets he's so literal. But there have been other times. At one point, Eric was hospitalized, and Brad would refuse to see him in the hospital because he said they're messing with him, and I don't want to have to deal with that. And then when Eric came home, or when he was released and went into a group home, Brad said, "My brother is back," and it was just. It's really wonderful to see them together and just enjoy being brothers. I'll just leave it at that.
No, it's okay.
So would you say that you didn't understand what your daughter was going through?
Oh, I didn't understand at all. I praise her today, but I didn't understand that how much work she put in to make their days more livable and make it through school with help there too. But I commend her because I had no clue what she did to make it through the day.
Do you think that's typical between parents and grandparents?
Yes, because going to group, I hear it over and over again, and I'm one of the grandparents that speaks out and says, wait a minute. How can your parents know if you don't let them see and tell them what is going on? And they need to see the child in action so you can say, now see, this is how it's different than just not minding. And so I think grandparents need to be made aware of what the problem is, because I had no clue. And listening to other people in group, I know that their parents don't have a clue. You can tell them over and over again, but until you live it, you just don't know it.
So what's the solution? If you're a parent, do you take your kids to the grandparents and leave them there for a week?
No, I don't think that's a solution either. And I just believe somehow there's got to be a way to bring the grandparents in on it. And I'm a dreamer, but I just feel like there's a lot of, I don't want to use the word ignorance, but not enough talking going on and not enough visual to understand what they're going through a 24-hour day. And when I learned, it was amazing. And now I understand why they're so tired. I understand now why they didn't go out a lot. It's not only money, it's what you have to go through to get them prepared and go somewhere. And so I understand so much more. So somewhere there's got to be an education for grandparents, or if the only one in your family is an aunt or an uncle, the people that could become involved with the kids, that they should know more, and that it isn't just the kids acting out. There's a reason for it.
I do have a daughter as well. She's actually 17, so there was quite a spread between the kids. And, you know, things are kind of difficult for her because she doesn't have the parent perspective of needing to take care of a child who has special needs. And so when she sees me treating him differently than I treated her when she was a child, so there's fairness issues that she goes through, and then there's also some jealousy because I spend a lot of time on him, and when she needs my attention, she can't have it immediately because he kind of takes precedence because he can't shift gears and she can. So, you know, there's those issues too.
Do you have anything that you would recommend to parents and grandparents? You've been both sides.
Yes.
What's the number one thing you'd recommend to each of them?
Learn what's going on and be patient. I've learned that if my anxiety builds up, the children feel it immediately and they act out. And so you need to get where you can work with them, not against them, and give them some leeway and really listen to them when they talk, because they have a lot to say, or they have body language that is telling you something. I've even run into the body language part, not actually through talking. So just learn, and patience, and it's hard to have the patience. And the only other thing I can think of to recommend is I didn't know what respite meant when I went into this group, and now I know and understand that gives you some freedom. And I didn't need freedom because they were my grandchildren. I could take care of them. I needed the freedom.
The number one thing is to find people who support you. That's totally number one. Because as a parent of a child with special needs, it's very isolating. It's something that you kind of have to pull yourself away from, you know, the life that you had before, because, you know, people don't understand, or your child doesn't fit in, or it's too difficult for your child to deal with that life. So you kind of pull yourself away from what you had before. And a lot of times the friends that you had before that kind of melt away. And that's just kind of, it's the thing about life. But what you can find in support groups, parent classes, you know, the more you learn about your child's needs, the more people you meet who also have children who have those same special needs or very similar special needs. And the more you connect with those parents, and the more support you get from those parents, and the more support you can offer them.
Like the airplane analogy, you need to put your oxygen mask on first so that you can be there to take care of your child. Well, this is what I feel like. I am the best parent when I manage my own stress, when I can be happy, and that means that I need to get exercise, and I need to take some time for myself to do the things that I enjoy, that relax me, because otherwise I am snappy and short with Alexa, and she behaves badly because I am behaving like this with her, and that's in the short term. In the short term, on a day-to-day basis, you have to take care of stress. And in the long term, if I want to be alive for as long as possible to be able to provide and take care of Alexa, then I need to try and take care of my own health also.
To find out about your child's disability, and not just to read one book, but to acquaint yourselves with a lot of, because there are different theories. You know, well, if you don't vaccinate your child, they won't get this, or if you don't do this, this won't happen. To learn about the disability, to learn what the strengths are of that child, to support the child in their strengths, to get involved with other families.
Grandparents, learn more about your grandchildren. Try to get the parents to speak to you. Try to listen, and don't go against them. I can see where it's hard to trust, depending on what's been going on, but try to believe them. And you can find out if it's right or wrong later on in life, but you need that trust and learn from it and be willing to help.
Just to be patient and expect that eventually they're going to do whatever you're hoping they will do, but don't expect that it's going to be, in the next what you think is a reasonable time period for it, and like for toilet training, we just kept doing it beyond the point of beyond the time in which we thought, okay, now she should be toilet trained. It was just regular, became part of our day to go sit and try on the toilet for years, and try to go, and eventually, she started making progress, a lot of progress.
I think too, you have to also take care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of your child. I don't care what age he is or she is. You have to stay healthy, which means you have to have another life. You have to have a life that gets out and does some things. You cannot just isolate, and you just can't be pushing all the time for your son or your daughter. You can't always be champion. You've got to take care of yourself, because if you don't, what happens is you crash, and then you can't take care of your son or your daughter.